Boo! Welcome to the Halloween episode of Double Feature Reviews. I'm Libby.
I'm David. Happy Halloween.
And today we're talking about lightly scary movies.
That's fair. That's fair.
I Am Legend and Shaun of the Dead.
Scary enough that, for example,
I screamed multiple times.
you refused to watch them in the dark.
Yes.
We had to watch it on a small screen instead of a big screen.
Mm-hmm. Those were preemptive measures.
Okay.
And they were mainly for I Am Legend, which I hadn't seen before. I have seen Shaun of the Dead before, and I was like, Shaun of the Dead is not that scary. I'll be fine. But I Am Legend, I didn't know what I was getting into, so I was like, we're going to take some preventative measures, such as not watching them in the dark, not watching them on big screens, occasionally just not watching them, just averting my eyes and having David tell me what's going on screen.
I might say not totally... I would say more than occasionally, frequently not watching what was on screen.
I looked at more than half of I Am Legend. You did look at
more than half of I Am Legend?
I looked at way more than half of I Am Legend.
I would say distinctly more than half.
I probably hit 90%. I definitely hit 80%.
I think you're definitely over 60%. I think 65.
I think it's way higher than
65.
that. I think it's way higher than that.
All right.
David, had you seen either of these movies before we watched them last night?
Yes, I had seen both of these movies. I think I've seen them both a couple times. Somewhere in that area. Yeah, I think I saw I Am Legend in theaters. It was a second-run theater.
Brave man.
And I've seen it since then. I've seen, I think, Shaun of the Dead only on home video.
Yeah, I had seen Shaun of the Dead, I think only once before, possibly twice. I believe this is in the DVD Netflix era, so we got it from Netflix. So I may have watched it twice, but it's not the greatest movie that's ever occurred. So I may have only watched it once. And then this is the first film of the Cornetto trilogy. I feel like I have seen the end of Hot Fuzz, and then I've also seen The World's End.
Yeah, I've seen the whole Cornetto trilogy. I might have seen Hot Fuzz. I think I have seen it 1.5 times.
Okay.
I only like the first half of Hot Fuzz, so
okay.
That's where I'm at on that one. Shaun of the Dead is the one I've seen the most. Mm-hmm. The one I think about the most, at least.
And there are also other films sort of in the greater I Am Legend cinematic universe. So this was originally a novel, and this is the third major film adaptation. The other two are not called I Am Legend. Have you seen those?
Yes, I've seen the original film, the first film, The Last Man on Earth with Vincent Price, and I've also seen the 1971. That's 1964, I believe. I've also seen the 1971 The Omega Man with Charlton Heston.
I decided that I didn't need those in my life.
Yeah, I mean, they're a lot more cartoony, and they're lower budget and lower concept. I think you don't need to watch either of those particular films, but it is interesting.
Are they less scary?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, in The Last Man on Earth, they're very athletically unimpressive zombies. Mm-hmm. They're in that family of zombies. So it doesn't present the same moment to moment peril. There's no jump scares or anything like that. In Last Man on Earth, the villains are mainly zombies that act and behave basically like humans, including talking and
having normal faces.
They have some scars, and kind of they're injured. They're injured humans, and I don't think you would find that one scary. It has a few moments of gore. I don't think you'd find them scary because they're not technically effective enough. Mm-hmm. I think I Am Legend is one of the most effective pieces of action cinematography that there is in the world, and though the stakes are very clear and there's not like a lot of evolving horror mystery, it's an intense watching experience. And the other films are just not even trying to be made at that level of experience. I mean, all of the films are united by the fact that they are about the idea of what if the zombies are actually, like, smart? What if the zombies are actually quite human, all things considered? And so they all play with that idea in different ways.
And to confirm, you have not read the book.
I've not read the book.
Okay.
Richard Matheson, who wrote the book, is the father of one of the scriptwriters of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
No way.
So we mentioned that in that episode.
Yeah.
So, that Richard Matheson, that one that we talked about.
So for the series title, I forgot that we needed to come up with one. So in the last 5 seconds, I have come up with To Horror or Not to Horror. That is the zombie. Which I think for a zero time is pretty impressive. David, what's your probably more thought out series title?
Well, mine's not that much more thought out. I decided to go pretty straight down the line here, this one. And I did have a little attention, so I went with I Can Save the Not Zombies. Originally, if I was going to do this as a film series, the title on the marquee would be I Can Save the Zombies. That's, what I think unites the film or helps make them both interesting is that they're both, maybe even more than the average zombie movie, you feel for the zombies, and the characters are, in different ways and in different levels of success or different ways of failing, are trying to sort of help the zombies through the experience. They're not the enemy, we feel for them. So that's I think the core point. Also, in both films, in various ways, they are not zombies. Although in Shaun of the Dead, we more or less give up on that by the end. So I think that makes a better podcast title. I Can Save the Not Zombies.
And for the people who are scaredy cats like me, who did not watch these movies, David, can you give us a brief plot introduction so that they know where we are?
Yeah, so I'm going to try giving a plot introduction and trying to list a genre as well.
Yeah, because I think the reason I came up with my title is that if you hear zombie movie, you normally think horror movie. Zombies are a classic horror monster. But neither of these is exactly a horror movie, even though I Am Legend is quite scary.
So I Am Legend is a cinematic action drama, and it's about a military scientist who hunts and is hunted by the infected as the world crumbles around him and he loses everything he loves, including his own mind. Shaun of the Dead is a satirical horror comedy about a couple of everyday Brits who are going nowhere with their life and who try to lead their friends and family through a growing zombie crisis.
Excellent. So now we're going to get deeper into I Am Legend. This is a 2007 film directed by Francis Lawrence. It was written by Mark, I'm going to try really hard, Protasevich and Akiva Goldsman, as we mentioned, based on the novel by Richard Matheson. It stars Will Smith as Dr. Robert Neville. Not in a lot of scenes, but his real-life daughter, Willow Smith, plays Robert's daughter, Marley Neville. Alice Braga as Anna. Sally Richardson Whitfield as Zoe Neville. And Dash Mihawk, or at least a CGI rendering of him, as what is listed as alpha male. We might call him the head zombie.
The big one.
The one who really looks like John Cena to me. Although, one of the problems was that...
There's one shot where he looks like John Cena.
The zombies all looked pretty... I couldn't tell if it's just that the zombies all looked pretty similar and we were actually seeing multiple ones, or if we were seeing the same guy over and over again. And he just... Do they all look like John Cena, or is there just one guy who looks like John Cena?
Yeah, I think that they're duplicating some of their models. And I think there are also two CGI models that do look pretty similar. So there's kind of like, whatever, the alpha male, and then there's alpha male junior. Okay. And then there are definitely some other ones that look different. But I think there's at least two people that look similar, and I think sometimes there are copies.
Okay.
Yeah, so the CGI zombies in the film are one of the most criticized parts of the movie. And personally, to me, they hold up fine. I've never been that big into really good CGI, so I'm willing to play the game there. But a lot of people did criticize them, and that's not a coincidence. This is a movie that had a challenging and very long production history, as can tend to happen. And in a variety of ways, this movie only happened because bigger plans for bigger movies got canceled, and this one became smaller. Originally, this was going to be a much higher budget movie directed by Ridley Scott, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, and involving some other people.
I think switching to Will Smith was probably the right choice.
Yeah, so this was in 1997. In 1997, the Schwarzenegger film, it was going to be set in Los Angeles. There was going to be absolutely zero dialogue for the first hour of the movie, and it was going to cost like $100 million in 1997, which was a ton of money. So they weren't going to pay that much money for that movie. So then they sort of crunched things down, and in 2002, Arnold Schwarzenegger said, "I'll be the producer of the movie," and they got Michael Bay in to direct, and that's when Will Smith joined the project. That one was still too expensive, so then Michael Bay left. They tried to get Guillermo del Toro of Pinocchio fame. That's his most famous movie.
That's his most famous movie.
Most famous movie.
To fans of our podcast.
So they tried to get the Pinocchio guy to do it. He wanted to do Hellboy too. So then they got Francis Lawrence, who did Constantine, is probably, and I think he did The Hunger Games?
Yeah, I think his most famous work is The Hunger Games. I think the books are a trilogy, but the movies are a quartet.
So the budget was a lot smaller. The plans for the film were less intense. And they only even got Will Smith to really come back because he had to delay his filming for Hitch. So he said, "I'll do it in like 3 months," which was faster than they wanted to do it. So originally, the zombies were not supposed to be CGI at all.
Okay.
They were supposed to be people in prosthetics, and they were going to hire professional dancers to do this special movement because they wanted them to do that thing they do in the movie where they're constantly breathing really hard and shaking their body back and forth because they're hyped up on adrenaline. And that didn't turn out to be a very good idea. It looked pretty weird, and the prosthetics were so heavy that the dancers couldn't do the motions right, and it looked like a kind of interesting abstract dance performance, but not like scary zombie monsters.
I think I would have preferred that movie.
I think you would have really preferred that movie. I think you really, really would have.
I'm interested to hear that the prosthetics were too heavy for them to move, because I feel like basically you just need these people to shave their head and then put a sort of like mattifying or sort of puttyifying makeup, and then just start with really strong people. Like, the zombies really don't look that different from most people. They're just bald.
But yeah, they canceled the prosthetic version, and then it was too late. Will Smith said we have to start early, and we canceled, and so then they had to rush the CGI. They were not happy about it. They said they needed at least another 6 months of production to make it look the way that they had planned.
Will Smith said they needed to start filming earlier, and this meant they had less time to do CGI?
Yes.
How does that work?
Will Smith said they had to start filming earlier, so they definitely couldn't do the dancers. They didn't have time to try to fix.
Okay, so they had to do CGI, strategy. And then even with the extra month or two from the moved up shooting, they still didn't have enough production.
I don't know what role that played with their release schedule, but they were not happy with it. They promised the studio they were not going to go over budget, so they weren't going to go over budget. They released this.
Okay. And I did think it was interesting that early in the movie, before we see any zombies, there's a sequence of Will Smith hunting a deer, which then gets eaten by a lion, which is all done in CG. No deer were harmed in the making of this movie. I am curious to know if dogs were harmed in the making of this movie, but we can get to that later.
The dog is fine. Everything's fine.
Okay.
Yes.
But I was like, wow, this CGI is not good. I really hope the zombies aren't also CGI, because it seems this is like a broadcast of like, hey guys, set your expectations low. I also think it didn't help that this is like 3 or 4 years after Lord of the Rings. The zombies look and move kind of Gollum-y, but the CGI is worse than what they were doing on Andy Serkis. So that didn't help people's impression.
Very true. I mean, this was not filmed at the budget of The Lord of the Rings, and you can really tell. The Lord of the Rings also did 3 movies in a row, so they could really take their time on the first CGI and then reuse the assets and process for the next 2. So, yeah, it's very fair. I noticed you did not list Abby, the dog, in the cast listing. I guess it's against the policy.
I couldn't find a listing for her. Oh, okay, sorry. I am on IMDb. They're listing 2 actors for Sam, the dog, Abby and Kona.
That's right.
The German Shepherds. It doesn't say one of them is junior. Possibly Abby was all adult Sam and Kona was all baby Sam, because we do get some puppy shots.
I think you might be right. Abby is listed usually as the main star, and Kona's secondary, so that would check out. Another fun production note is that the director based the sound scheme on the movie, especially in the first half, on Jane Campion's The Piano. Because he really liked the low sound approach, and he said he had to watch low sound movies because he had a baby at home.
Okay.
And he was like, "This is a good movie. I really like how it's setting a tone and like building tension in a subtle way with sound." So The Piano is my favorite movie of all time. So I also quite enjoy this movie, and I can really see the connection in the aesthetic there.
And what does low sound mean? Just like quiet?
Yeah, it just means quiet.
Okay.
It does. Okay. It does mean quiet. You know, part of a movie's job typically is to engross you and make you feel like you're being transported somewhere that you're not. And part of the way it does that, of course, is with sound. So you typically want to always be stimulating the watcher's ears as well. Otherwise, you'll break the magic spell and they'll realize you're just sitting in a chair. And I feel like The Piano and I Am Legend both do the opposite. They draw you in by being very careful with the way that they... I mean, we were just talking recently about The Portrait of a Lady on Fire, another low-sound film, and I think it's very effectively used there. I would say that it's a maybe easier technique to use in an action movie, because we can easily compare this subtle soundscape to the intense action moments and the big explosions and the... I don't know. I guess there are explosions in I Am Legend. They have explosions.
Yes, we are meant to understand that two helicopters crash into each other. They cut away before the helicopters crash. So
at the end, there
is an explosion.
I believe there are two explosions.
I don't know if scientifically that does qualify as an explosion.
Well, that's an interesting
I think that is a rapid igniting.
Which one? Oh, you're talking about the
rapid
charge.
Igniting.
That would be a rapid ignition. I don't know the scientific. But
yeah.
That's fair.
I think too much of this stuff, I think something has to be contained for it to be an explosion.
I'll take your word for it. So one explosion, I take it back. Well, I was wrong then. It was filmed in 2006 in New York City, and the filmmakers are very proud of the fact that is the real Brooklyn Bridge. That is the real... They
really blew up the Brooklyn Bridge.
They did spend $5 billion on that one scene in the Brooklyn Bridge, of course, with all of those people and everything, and having to use the whole bridge and whatnot. That is real Fifth Avenue. They really blocked off Fifth Avenue, Times Square and everything, and you're really seeing them walk down the street. So I think that is really arresting imagery. So I might say money well spent.
Yeah, we've also been there recently, so it was interesting to see how Times Square has changed. Wicked still has the same slot, but Hairspray, Rent, and Avenue Q, those signs are all gone. And also... this did mean that the studio was able to get a really lovely shot of the poster for Batman vs. Superman as we pan up to the sky in Times Square. Come watch our other movie.
Yeah, there was another big movie advertisement in there.
Shrek.
Shrek, that's right.
We see basically a whole scene from Shrek.
Yeah, that becomes a major plot point of the movie. So I would say pretty effective cross-advertising, all things considered. I'll take that.
I still don't want to see Batman v Superman, so I'm not sure how effective the cross-advertising was.
When did Batman v Superman come out? I don't follow superhero movies closely enough, but were they making Batman v Superman in 2007?
If you had asked me, I would have said way later than 2007. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is 2016. Yeah. Was there an earlier one?
Was there?
Is Dawn of Justice the sequel to something else? Was there a Broadway show that was Batman v Superman?
I feel like there's definitely a Batman/Superman movie podcast that could help us out here. We're in the wrong place.
I believe this is an animated straight-to-video thing, but in 2009 there was Batman/Superman: Public Enemies.
Maybe that was it.
Did they update the film that they are advertising in the print we saw?
It's interesting that you say that. I don't think so. But this is one of the most prominent examples of a film being edited and re-released in the future, because there's an alternate ending to this movie. And originally, the ending we saw is the alternate ending. This was there was supposed to be another ending, and the ending emphasizes more clearly that
the original ending.
The original ending emphasizes more clearly that the infected are intelligent, emotionally sophisticated, that they formed a integrated society. Basically, the plot in the in the real okay, nice,
in the novel.
No, I'm talking
sorry.
about it for the original version of the film.
Okay.
So
the original ending, which is not the one we saw.
Yeah. So in the theatrical release, which is what we watched, and most people think of as the ending of I Am Legend. At the end of the movie, the zombies break into Will Smith's hideout after he has found the two other human survivors who tell him that there's a safe village in Vermont they can run to, and to save these two people and help them escape with the zombie cure that Will Smith has invented, Will Smith heroically sacrifices himself and dives into the zombies with a grenade to stop the advance. That's not what's supposed to happen at the end. And
then the lady goes to Vermont
right.
with the vial of blood cure.
That's right.
And yea, verily, we are all saved. And that is how Robert Neville becomes legend.
That's right. So in the originally filmed version of I Am Legend, at the end the zombies break in, but it turns out that they're not actually trying to kill Will Smith, and they don't care about Will Smith. They're trying to save the zombie that Will Smith has captured to test the cure on, and this is a rescue operation, and they're just trying to save their friend that they love. And once they get their friend, and they negotiate this with Will Smith, they leave, and are like, can you just chill out, Will Smith? Come on.
Yeah, that's basically what I thought would happen, right up until it wasn't happening. So as we often do, we're gonna go to the end of the film, talk about the end of the film. So Will is in this sort of glass cage, with the two other humans and this zombie woman that he's experimenting on. She's like chained to the gurney.
She's unconscious.
She's also shackled to the gurney.
True.
The woman's like father or husband, some man who loves her, is using his face to break the glass open. Will tells Anna to hide with the kid and the vial of blood. And then he looks at this picture of his wife and daughter, grabs a grenade, and then pulls the pin on the grenade, which ignites the fumes that had been released in his lab. So everyone burns to death. What I thought was going to happen when he picks up this picture of his wife and daughter is that he would put it up on the glass to be like, hey, I get it. And then he was sort of fiddling around in some drawers, and what he in fact got out was a grenade. I assumed he was getting the key to the shackles so that he could unlock this woman and then let her go. And that is, well, it's hard to say that that's more similar to what happens in the book, because the book is extremely different.
Yeah, in the original, I believe the original film is sort of closer to the book. In the original book, the Dr. Neville does not meet another human survivor. He meets a zombie who has only partially made the transition into being a...
So in the book, they're not... maybe we'll take a break to talk about this.
Yeah, let's do it.
In the book, they're not called zombies.
Right.
He calls them vampires. And this is 1954, so zombie may have been a less popular term, but people definitely knew what it was. And also, I'm not totally sure I would call the infected of this film zombies, because a key feature of them is that they are not dead. They are living people who have never died and are just sick. Whereas I think a required element of zombies is that they are dead.
The incurability of zombies is a definitional part of being a zombie, you're saying?
Yeah, I think, that's what they're like in Shaun of the Dead. In Shaun of the Dead, you become a zombie after you have died. That's also what they're like in Walking Dead and, most zombie media. And I believe the original, voodoo version of a zombie is a being that has died.
I think that's fair, and I would respect that distinction, and I've never heard anyone from the I Am Legend production team call them zombies, so I think that's very fair. They're also another standard feature of zombies in most zombie media is that they're slow. These zombies are super athletic. Yes, they're described as humans with overactive adrenaline. Mm-hmm. I'm not a medically informed enough to comment on that either, but yes.
And also a sun allergy, which is actually a vampire thing.
Yeah, I've never heard them call them vampires either.
Yeah.
But I think in the original marketing for I Am Legend, it was kind of implied that they maybe were sort of vampires. I think they were trying to play to the vampire fans and the zombie fans by not taking a side. But yeah, that's not necessarily where it comes from.
Yeah. Vampires are, of course, also definitionally dead.
Yeah, I feel like you don't, when someone gets bitten by a vampire in a movie, they don't die and then come back as a vampire. So I guess that's true that they are categorized as undead, but I don't know if I buy it.
I think there's more vampire media in which like the possibility is presented of a vampire becoming a human again. Whereas if this is zombie media, this is one of the only zombie medias where like coming back to being a human is presented as an option. Like in Shaun of the Dead, quite clearly the only option for when someone is a zombie is to kill them.
Yeah, I think the living athletic zombie, which is perhaps not a zombie, is part of why I enjoy I Am Legend a lot, in that it, less than a traditional zombie movie, it doesn't strain credulity as much. It tries, I think I Am Legend is probably better categorized as a science fiction movie than as a horror movie. I mean, it's sometimes an action, intense, scary moment horror movie, but it's not a horror movie from the traditional speculative way that we divide these things up.
Yeah, I agree. It's definitely not something like Paranormal Activity. So for something like Paranormal Activity, where like that's a horror movie, it's just everything that's there is there to be scary. And so I feel very comfortable saying, that's not for me. I don't have to watch it. Don't need it in my life. With I Am Legend, I'm kind of disappointed that it was so scary because like there is stuff in there that I am interested in, which I feel like I was in some ways prevented from accessing by the fact that I couldn't watch it. And I don't think I am alone, or I don't think I'm even the most scaredy cat when it comes to watching horror movies.
Yeah, I think the film wanted to draw from the horror movie fans who do go see a lot of movies, who are willing to pay for the tickets. And then I think you're right that at its heart, it's actually a very human drama and a very engrossing and natural way to present highly cinematic action. I mean, the action is really exciting and you really feel like you are this person going through these moments. It is
when you can watch the screen.
Yeah, I guess you weren't really watching any of those parts now that I
watched some of those parts.
Okay, yeah. So, I think you can see a connection between other movies that were made around the same time, The Bourne Identity, another action movie that really tries to present the super spy genre in a more grounded way with a more immersive, a lot of eye-level cinematography, handheld. And so I found that really powerful, and I found it a really interesting human story. So, yeah, I agree that if you're interested in action horror and you want to see a quality film, you're probably not going to do a lot better than this. But if you're definitely not interested in action horror, then I see how that's kind of sad, because there's a really good movie in here if you can stomach it.
Yeah, can someone make a not scary edit of I Am Legends? Because what I don't like, and different people don't like different things, I don't like the really long, suspenseful build-up to a jump scare.
Yeah, this movie is famous for like a 10-minute sequence or so.
Yeah,
which is basically
I didn't watch.
One long build-up to a jump scare.
Yeah.
That's maybe its most famous moment. Yeah, there were times where anytime we started to hint towards those moments, you would stop watching, and I feel like you missed some of even the funniest parts of the movie because they're played against that scary build-up. So I know what you mean. The original film ending was more focused on this idea of the zombies being human, and it was basically about this woman who was half zombie gets in contact with Vincent Price, and she sort of convinces him that he's been hunting these zombies the whole time when they're actually real people and they have like a treatment for it.
Yeah.
And so he's the bad guy.
In that one, Vincent Price is just like out there trying to kill them just because they're bad, right? Whereas the Will Smith's Robert Neville is not trying to kill them except for one scene where he loses it. He's trying to cure them, and he's like capturing people in order to test cures on them.
Yeah, and in the alternate ending to the Will Smith I Am Legend, once he realizes just how human these zombies are, he looks at his wall of zombie test subjects and is like, oh, I was the monster the whole time. Mm-hmm. I don't think that message actually resonates in the film because as he is not hunting them, that's not necessarily his game. And, I love how in I Am Legend, throughout the film, we come to really respect and admire the zombies. That's such a great experience, and it creates a cool moral for the story about respecting your enemies and respecting people who are different than you or suffering from disease, because we come, they learn, and they're incredibly coordinated and intelligent and social.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I didn't really go on this journey with you because I fully got to that point at the first place where they indicate that it could happen. When he's trying to get his test subject and he sets up this complicated trap and, whooshes her out. And another infected runs out and we see his skin burning and as he's like thinking about going out into the light to save this woman. And then he's in so much pain that he has to retreat back. I was like, okay, there's a story. Like, even if you're a zombie, you still love people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that aspect of the story is really powerful, but I don't think we can set up Will Smith, Robert Neville, as really being the villain of this story.
Correct.
At the end. And that's one of the reasons why I don't think the original test screens of the film showed the original ending where they sort of become friends and Will Smith survives and he himself takes the cure to Vermont. But they failed partially, I think, because the moral is a bit more muddled, and also because we spend a lot more time looking in close up at the CG zombies. And it was really these final sequences that was the straw that broke the camel's back on the audience, and the anti-CGI stuff was just too hard. So they had to not focus on the zombies' humanity because they couldn't make them look convincingly human.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, once you're screening, it's too late. But if I had seen that as a problem while I was working on the film, if I had been involved in working on the film, I would have been like, okay, at this point, we're going to switch away from CG into actual people. And it's a little bit artsy because now we're getting this from Robert's perspective. He is seeing them more as people than as these artificial constructions. And then you can have actual people who are just bald and maybe with some veins painted on, portraying human emotion. If you want that, I do recommend the novel The Girl with All the Gifts by M.R. Carey, which is a zombie novel with a similar sort of vibe. There is a film adaptation, which I haven't seen, so I don't know if it's good or not.
I think this is an interesting example of a lot of things that people have tried to do in cinema in the last 30 years, that there's a lot of criticisms of things that are missing. I think this is a good example of that. This movie was financially successful. It made about $600 million. It had a big total budget. But yeah, it made $450 million. And it had a budget of about $150 million. And they got no Oscars or BAFTAs attention or anything like that. And the critical reception hasn't always been great. It has a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes. But I think it's built a very strong cult following and is now considered a very strong example of its genre. And this is a movie that doesn't have a lot of dialogue and is willing to present things in kind of a somewhat non-standard alternate way. It is a remake of a movie. And I actually think of two movies. And I think this is an example of a great remake. I think it's much more interesting and often more effective to remake older movies that weren't super successful. Normally people want to remake some really big name movie to catch up on the nostalgia of it, and that gives the idea of remakes a bad name. And if you say the word remake to anyone, that just sounds like a terrible idea. But I think of remaking movies is great. You learn what works and what doesn't work, and you have things to sample and reference to. And so the choice to remake two older movies that really weren't that great, but you could tell had a great aspect to them and a great core definition, and you can see something could come out of that. I think that shows a lot of insight, and it's part of why this movie was successful and powerful, even though those movies are not household names.
I'm actually not even sure I feel comfortable calling this a remake. I think if someone had read the Matheson novel, and then you watch this film, if they changed the main character's name and they changed the title of the movie, I don't think they would recognize this as an adaptation of the novel. And the two other films are closer to being adaptations of the novel because the Robert Neville character, he's such a good guy. He's out there risking his own life to try to save humanity, even though he also sort of thinks that's hopeless.
Well, he's clearly very noble. I think the film presents him as very foolish.
Yeah.
And
I think he's presented as aspirational.
yeah, it is interesting to see.
Whereas the novel Robert Neville is revealed to be the villain. Like, at the end, as he's being executed by the vampires for having killed so many of them, he realizes that he is a legend to them, just as, vampires like Dracula were to us.
Yeah, and I think that is something that is missing from this version. I mean, I think he's presented in this really... he's presented in the ultra dad role. Mm-hmm. His job is basically to look at the camera and say, I'm going to keep it together. I'm not going to give up. The family can depend on me. So I think the dialogue in this movie, this doesn't really distract from my viewing experience, but sometimes the dialogue in this movie is almost laughably cliche. But there's also not a lot of it. It's really there for atmosphere and for punctuation. But yeah, he's not an interesting character. And I do totally see how this is an aspirational movie. Part of the movie is that he's the only man left in New York. So he gets to have the nicest apartment, the nicest car.
It's not even an apartment. He's got a full townhouse on Washington Square, and he's stolen some Van Goghs from the Met to decorate his house.
So it's an interesting combination of apocalyptic dystopia and aspirational content mixed in at the same time.
Yeah, I too would like to be the only person living in New York, or at least have the whole island of Manhattan to myself.
But yeah, I mean, he is presented as this ultra noble character, but I'm glad the film goes out of the way to point out that from the beginning he is not making good choices, and he's obviously being driven by his own ego or his super ego, and how he is gradually breaking down. He does these techniques to try to keep his mind working, where he sets up like mannequin friends around the city that he says hi to.
You're sane when you're talking to mannequins.
And it goes great. He definitely doesn't have any mental problems. He starts forcing his dog to eat vegetables like it's his daughter. So he's clearly suffering. And though we admire him, and he is, he's good at fighting and he's good at science, so he's clearly a talented person in that sense, we're also given lots of chances to condescend to him and see how his immaturity and his hyper-zealous alpha male bit is not even helping necessarily him achieve his own goals.
Once I understood the premise of of Robert's situation, I was like, oh, this movie needs to be Castaway. Like, apparently Robert has been alone for something on the order of 2 years, which is way too long for a person to be alone. I haven't actually seen Castaway. How long does our hero last before he
I don't know.
Starts talking to his volleyball?
I really don't know. Before he starts talking to the volleyball, minutes or days.
Minutes? Okay.
I mean, the bit of Castaway is at first it's like a joke to himself, and then it
okay. When
grows.
is he emotionally attached to the volleyball?
When he cuts his hand, and then he puts his face. I think that's when it really starts to get him.
How long has he been alone at that point?
I honestly don't know. If I had to guess, I'd say 3 or 4 months.
Okay. Yeah. So in outdoors camp, what they teach you is you can survive 3 hours without shelter, slightly depending on the climate you're in, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food, and 3 months without companionship. So 3 months is the point, and you can probably last a little bit longer if you've got a dog. But this man's been alone for 2 years. So I was wondering, is all of this a hallucination or something? And I did like the scenes, but I think they manifested too late, in the time scale of the reality of the film, where he's just losing it. Fred, the mannequin, is in the wrong place, and he just shoots the mannequin.
I love that scene. That's one of my favorite action scenes of all time, because it is really interesting to see Will Smith's performance and to see someone, which I feel like happens so rarely in cinema, where somebody just completely loses it and cannot deal with the situation. I mean, in any media, in books, in cinema, and tabletop role-playing games, people are often confronted with situations that should just blow their mind. And when real people experience these situations, they break down. And we see Will Smith really start to do that. He cannot process the situation. And also, again, this is where, even though we've given all these hints and clues, we reach another level of respect for the zombies, or the infected. Because we shows the infected understand what motivates Will Smith. They understand how his motivations on a deep personal and social level. They know that he has a relationship with this mannequin, and they know how to manipulate him to the trap using that. So
yeah, and they also copy his trap.
That's right, of course.
Yeah, which brings me to a back to film school moment for Mr. Lawrence. When Will, the trap, is basically makes a lasso around his ankle and then strings him up so he's suspended by his ankle. He's there for hours, and I think you would die from increased blood flow to the head.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I think what he experienced was technically...
Like people are sometimes hung up and down for hours and do not immediately die.
I don't know exactly how long it takes. But anyway, so, sort of dramatic action moment when he wakes up where he has to, pull out a knife and then, reach all the way up to his ankle while he's suspended upside down to cut the rope off. Okay, so he's super strong. He's using his super strength that was established in an earlier sequence, which I believe is there so that Will Smith can show everyone how strong he is. He's doing some pull-ups, and he does some jogging on the treadmill, and he also makes the dog jog on the dog's treadmill.
I think the dog's doing it for fun.
Okay.
To be fair. He's poisoning the dog. I'm on board with that. But I think the dog's having a great time on the treadmill.
Okay. He's only doing those 2 exercises, and we absolutely picked the wrong exercise for the first one with the pull-ups. Because one, those are not real pull-ups. He's using 50% legs to get him up there, and he's not doing full range of motion. He's only in the top third of his range of motion. So Will Smith, I'm not impressed that you can do 9 pull-ups. You have done 0 pull-ups. Those are not pull-ups. And also, the exercise that needed to be there was an inverted crunch, have him suspended by his knees, hanging down, and then crunching up to his knees. Because that's the action that he is doing later. So I just really don't like it when the setup and payoff don't form a neat loop.
I love setup and payoff. So I'll say I think I really agree with you, and that would have been better. I think...
Yeah, maybe Will Smith couldn't do that exercise, but he also couldn't do the one that they actually shot, so...
I think if Mr. Lawrence was here, he would say that, okay, in that moment, I think you are overestimating how much Will Smith is supposed to look good in this moment. I think it's supposed to look not like he's Mr. Superhero, particularly in that moment, but that he is really struggling to do this, and he's not having a great day today. Things are going bad for him. And so, if they had given that setup, to make it satisfying, they would have had to show him sort of heroically succeed at this situation, because he'd only have to do one of them, so to speak, in this, and then it would have been too easy. So we need to have some exercise.
Maybe they show him failing to do it in the initial exercise
there
sequence.
It is.
So
Yes.
don't start off with that one. Start off with bicep curls, something basic everyone knows. This is a workout montage. The bicep curls, he's doing fine with those. Then he's like, okay, I'm gonna do my inverted crunches. He tries, but it's so hard and he can't do it. He needs to wait until his life is actually on the line, and then he finds the strength inside of him to do an inverted crunch.
You did it.
Thank you.
This is it. As well as being proud of being filmed across the emptied streets of New York City, which apparently there were people, of course, directly behind the camera screaming at Will Smith the whole time. So good on them for pulling it off. As well as that, they're also very proud of the fact that they filmed inside of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, which typically does not allow filming inside. And they were able to do this partially by selling the film as a religious film to the Catholic Diocese of New York City.
Okay, I'm not sure I got that.
I mean, the film, I think, partially, maybe because of these negotiations, does make a point to have some subtle and explicit religious messages. I mean, the character... Anna, thank you. She's claiming to be speaking to God, and that she does save Will Smith from suicide, and...
Only to allow him to do it later.
But he's heroically sacrificing himself then, so I guess God's fine with that.
Not just wasting his life.
God thumbs up that one.
Okay.
And there's this sort of also a message about the evils of modern science and how we're tinkering with the way things are. The virus is said to be Emma Thompson's fault.
Yeah, Emma Thompson did kill 8 billion people.
And she was messing around with those viruses. The scientists.
How dare you try to cure cancer? Straight to jail with you.
So I can see why that was somewhat attractive. I guess that does also sort of play into the save the zombies somewhat in that sense. But I thought Emma Thompson did a great job honestly.
I know. I was sad that we only got to see her for the first 90 seconds.
I think it's actually brilliant that we only get to see her in the first 90 seconds. If we see that character at all and try to bring it full circle, it's going to make it too laughable, honestly, a little bit at what's happening here. But her performance is incredibly arresting, and she does a great job of developing this character in a tiny amount of time and sort of giving us a villain to root against, but also we do see her as very well intentioned at the same time. So I think the choice to bring in Emma Thompson for this cameo role was a brilliant choice. And you're like, oh, that's Emma Thompson. That's a famous person here. And I don't know. I think we have a best cameo contender, possibly. That's my opinion. I would nominate this person. I think they're in the short list. I believe it.
Another sequence that I wasn't totally sure what its function was in the film, and maybe you can explain it to me, or maybe you can validate me thinking that it's bad, was in the flashback to where the wife and daughter are escaping in the helicopter. There's a quarantine on Manhattan, and you have to get a scan, like a retinal scan is what confirms whether or not you have the disease. Neville and his daughter both pass the retinal scan, and then the wife does not pass the retinal scan. She's not going to be able to get airlifted out. Robert Neville, since he is part of the army, he's a lieutenant colonel, is able to yell at the SWAT guys or whoever they are to do the scan again, and then it turns out it was a false positive or something, so she passes the scan the next time and she's able to get out. Now, what I was convinced was going on in that sequence, because at that point, it kind of seems like this is just a Manhattan problem. Like, the president is making an announcement saying, like, due to the dangerousness of the virus, it is with heavy heart that we lock down Manhattan, that we quarantine Manhattan, and not that. It is also interesting to be watching this film in a post-COVID era. The president is not saying, you all need to shelter in place in your homes, everybody across America. This is just a Manhattan problem. So it seemed like, I was like, okay, I guess this is just a Manhattan problem. I'm not totally sure that makes sense, but whatever. She failed the retinal scan, then passed the retinal scan, then gets out. And I was like, aha. So the story is going to be, he thought it was just a Manhattan problem. He saves Manhattan somehow, or at some point he has to leave Manhattan, and he goes up and he's like, the rest of the world is going to be okay though, but it's not, because his wife carried it out and infected the rest of the world. But then she gets hit by a helicopter, and so none of that matters. So why was that sequence? Is that just to show us that, like, he's a big important military guy who can boss people around? I just don't know why we had the sequence where she has the false positive. And I don't know if it's supposed to tell us, does she have the disease or not?
Yeah, I do agree that is not fully narratively satisfying, so I can't really defend it from beginning to end. I think there are a couple interesting things there. One element which I feel like is subtle, it's not emphasized, but maybe it's in the back of a lot of viewers' minds, is that he puts her in that helicopter. Mm-hmm. And she didn't have to be there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's partially there to set up this narrative of Will Smith thinks he's going to solve every problem just by himself grabbing the problem and shaking it really hard and everything's going to work. But actually, he can't see the bigger picture, and he's putting the people that he's trying to save in harm's way. So I think that is one aspect of it which we do see more played out in the second half of the film. I think also it's the strategy is to really make people think that Will Smith has hope, and then to show, after we've already seen him fight through all of these really difficult short-term tragedies in the main timeline of the film, that actually he doesn't have any hope. Mm-hmm. He's already lost the stuff that he's cared about, and he's a lost person. And this maybe helps us to digest his sacrifice at the ending and help us understand why he's given up so much. But I think mainly it just makes us feel that much more attached to the peril he's going through and to his relationship with his dog. We realize, oh wow, this dog is literally the only thing that he has left.
I'm fine with her getting hit by a helicopter part. For the record,
I'm going to quote you on that.
For the record, I am fine with her getting hit by a helicopter. I just don't understand the false is it a false positive scan?
Yeah.
like, why not? There's already like a really dramatic element to that scene. Like, and, obviously there's all the people yelling and screaming, but there's the woman who's clearly infected, but it isn't, all the way gone, who's like begging people to take her child. So it's not like we needed another point of tension, another zoom in on a specific problem to illustrate the drama of that scene.
Yeah, again, it is Will Smith who, it's not like if you fail your first scan, they're just going to pull you off the bridge and summarily execute her.
She's going to be trapped.
Yeah, right.
And will presumably die.
He wants her to pass the scan so he can get her on that helicopter right now, because that's how he's going to save her. Oh, but it turns out it's not how he's going to save her. So I think that particular moment...
it's just there to be a character moment for him butting his head against the problem, as zombies do. As
zombies do. So I think that is the answer to your question. I think it's also just, how can we get some cheap action out of this moment, which is actually just people being read and a little scanned, and nothing very interesting is going to happen until we cut back a couple more times and we finally get to see the helicopters collide. Or we don't actually get to see the helicopters collide.
They couldn't afford that one. I really wanted to know if his wife was actually sick.
Yeah.
And we never find out.
I think we can conclude that we don't know. Okay. We have no particular reason to think that's true. To me, I think subtly what the film is doing is making a comment about privilege and talking about how he's able to get out of there when all these people are suffering. I really expected the infected mother whose eyes are bleeding and stuff. I expected her to pop and start attacking people and stuff, and I thought it was going to become a proper action scene, but that scene was already too expensive, and they were not going to also do a zombie attack with all the people on the bridge.
Yeah, well, I think it also, that is there to be one more setup to show that, the zombies really just love their loved ones. Her goal is not to harm people. Her goal is to protect her child.
Yes. I think overall, this is one of the best examples of making show don't tell work in a modern cinematic experience. And the dialogue, there is some exposition in there, but it's often very much in the background, sometimes literally just newscasters talking in the background when there's interesting visually things going on.
We watched with subtitles on, and there were definitely some things that were in the subtitles that you could not hear. So I recommend watching this movie with subtitles.
Yeah, if you're not watching in a cinema with big speakers, then I think it will pay off definitely to watch more with subtitles. And a lot of the dialogue that we do get to hear from the actors isn't exposition or really talking through the events of what's happening here. It's just people having very basic human reactions. And I would love to have more experiences like this watching a movie where I get to experience a lot of what makes cinema really special. I also think that I'm very pleased with how it negotiates attracting horror viewers, which I think this movie was, again, pretty successful. It was a financially successful movie. This film has more ratings on IMDb than any other movie we've seen. It has over 800,000 IMDb ratings. Its score isn't that great. It's a 7.2. But it has more...
I want to see where that is 5 years from now with Barbie and Oppenheimer.
That's fair. But
our two biggest movies are our two most recent releases.
It has more than Barbie and Oppenheimer now. And it's only been a year. But that's an achievement here. This is clearly a movie that a lot of people have seen and a lot of people had a reaction to and felt connected with. And... one of my other favorite scenes in the movie is when it might be our first flashback when Dr. Neville and his wife are riding through the streets of New York in some sort of SUV at the beginning of their evacuation. And
listening to the radio.
Yeah. And Will Smith reveals that, no, honestly, the zombies are gonna win. Sorry. His wife is struggling to believe it, and he's struggling to believe it, and we get the first jump scare of the movie, where a zombie jumps at their SUV and smashes his head against the window. And, okay, it's a jump scare. It's a pretty well-executed jump scare. It's kind of a very scary moment.
It made me stop watching.
But it's...
And also scream.
It's partially so effective as a jump scare because it's not just, a scary thing flashes on the screen. It's really emotionally connected with the story. These are characters who are refusing to admit that these scary things that are around them and are trying to find a way to conceptualize things where it's not happening. And then suddenly, as the film as the scene needs us to do, they are confronted with the problem. They are very much confronted with the problem. And in this flash, we realize part of what makes jump scares worthwhile parts of art is that there is a real human experience of thinking and hoping that maybe everything's not going to be all right, and how, well, you need to prepare yourself for this scary thing that's going to happen. You need to accept that it's going to happen. And we get to go through that experience in the same way the characters are experiencing it, and it still looks exciting and interesting on the screen. So if you're going to make an action horror movie, and you can do that and use it to tell stories, then even though I don't really have any attachment to horror movies, I'm in. One thing I started talking about at the end of the episode, but then I forgot to finish, is that, yes, this is one of the most prominent examples of a movie being re-edited and re-released, because there's going to be a sequel to this movie. There's going to be I Am Legend 2 with both Will Smith and Michael B. Jordan in starring roles. And so that would mean that Will Smith is alive, and
maybe he's playing a different character.
I did not know. He is playing Robert Neville in I Am Legend 2.
Well, I guess we didn't technically see him die when he pulled the pin.
Wow, that would be impressive.
Just a real burnt man.
Just various pieces of shrapnel. Let's not even go there. So, what is going to happen, or may have already happened, is that they are going to re-release this movie onto digital platforms with the alternate ending, or the original ending.
Okay, the
bad
original
CG ending where they learn to love the zombies and Will Smith survives and goes to Vermont. So
I'll take it.
Yeah.
I think it's better. I can imagine the CGI being better, but it's harder to imagine a fully different plot.
Yeah, I think they made the right choice with going with the ending that they released in the theatrical version. I do think that's a better ending to the movie. I think that one it's sappy, and it just doesn't play that well on screen, in my opinion. But soon we're going to find out, or maybe we've already found out, because, it's going to be re-released, so the official ending is going to change to be the originally filmed ending. To make number 2
so that movie. Will can be there.
People love Will Smith.
Okay, but now moving into the slightly safer waters of Shaun of the Dead. Way less scary. You got to admit, less scary.
Yeah, okay, safer for the viewer.
Safer for the viewer.
Okay, got it.
I think also safer for the characters. More people are alive, although we are much earlier in the apocalypse.
Yeah, I mean...
And also, you can just outrun the zombies.
That's true. I mean...
the zombies are not a physical match for us.
Shaun of the Dead does not feature is not about super soldiers. So they arguably have a rougher time of it. Certainly per unit of peril, but I know what you mean.
If Robert Neville had been in Shaun of the Dead, he would have been fine. So the metadata for Shaun of the Dead, this is a 2004 film. Very interesting. This film is rated R. I Am Legend was rated PG-13. It's clearly not based on how scary Libby finds it. Shaun of the Dead has way more cursing in it.
Yeah, it's a profane film.
Yeah. It was directed by Edgar Wright, written by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright, and it stars Simon Pegg as Shaun, Nick Frost as his non-paying roommate Ed, Kate Ashfield as Liz, Lucy Davis as Diane, Dylan Moran as David, Bill Nighy as Philip, Shaun's dad, stepdad, Penelope Wilton as Barbara, Shaun's mom, and not a main character, in it extremely briefly, but currently the most famous person in the cast is Martin Freeman, playing a man whose name I don't remember, but Yvonne's boyfriend.
Yeah, he is Shaun's girlfriend named Liz?
Shaun's girlfriend is Elizabeth, parentheses, Liz.
Thank you. Yeah, he's Liz's counterpart.
Yeah, and Rafe Spall as Nick Frost's counterpart. For people who know who Rafe Spall is.
From Little Britain, maybe, I guess, most famous?
He's been in all 3 Cornetto films. To me, he's most famous for being Timothy Spall's son.
Okay. Wait, who's Timothy Spall? Which one's he?
I get not keep from
course.
champagne.
It all painfully rushed back on me in that moment.
I don't think that's his most famous
He's great
role.
in many roles. Sweeney Todd.
Yeah.
Interestingly, this film received no attention from the Oscars.
You shock me.
But it was nominated for 2 BAFTAs.
It is a British film.
Including Outstanding British Film.
There we go.
Which it lost to My Summer of Love. It's also Neera Park, the producer of the film, was nominated for Outstanding Debut by a British Writer, Director, or Producer. lost to A Way of Life. I don't know that we need producers to be nominated for the debuts, but
they get to have so much money.
Yeah, I think maybe that might be it for the nominally artistic roles. I wouldn't mind.
You wanted Edgar or Simon to get?
I think that would be more appropriate, as a matter of fact. But I'm sure Nero Park did a lot of hard work and did a great job on the film. That's not my point at all. But I wouldn't mind. This film grew out of a television project that Simon Pegg and Nick Frost worked on. The British sitcom Spaced, which premiered in 1999, directed by Edgar Wright, starring Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and written by Simon Pegg and Jessica Hines. The sitcom featured an episode where they have to deal with a zombie invasion. I haven't seen Spaced. I think it's like a dream or something.
That would make sense.
But they had a lot of fun making it and thought that it was some of the more exciting content they were able to produce. And so they said, we should just do this episode as a movie. That would be good. So the film was shot in May and June of 2003 in London. It premiered in London in March of 2004. And did not make a huge splash financially when it was first released. Made $3 million at the opening weekend in the UK, $3 million in the US and Canada. It has been re-released a few different times since then, and it's now up to a worldwide total box office of something like $45 million against a $6 million budget. So this is a huge cult classic, and tons of people have seen this digitally, in home video, Netflix, DVDs, etc. So, But
it does also seem like a fun night at the cinema with your friends.
Yes, it's definitely a financially successful movie. It's not a blockbuster. It probably hasn't made hundreds of millions of dollars for the studio. But it has received a lot of critical acclaim. I Am Legend has a 68% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This movie has a 92% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is very good. And I think goes to what makes this movie successful, which is, it's not my favorite movie of all time, but I think this movie does a superb job of having broad appeal. Mm-hmm. Just about anybody is going to enjoy this movie. People who like horror movies, people who think horror movies are ridiculous, people who are looking for, comedic elements. I don't know if it's going to impress the world's most artsy film connoisseur, but this is a movie that hits on several different levels and that people of a lot of different ages and backgrounds can enjoy. It has a 7.9 on IMDb, a very respectable score, with 604,000 votes. And again, I think the IMDb crowd, this is exactly what they're looking for. A film with pretense, but that is fundamentally there to please a very average theater goer, so it's very easy to compromise on. Mm-hmm. I noticed at the beginning of the movie, so we'll try to talk more about the beginning a little bit.
Thank you.
They use the same technique of having news in the background. That's a classic zombie technique, and this is a parody. Or
just disaster movie in general technique.
This is a parody to some extent of movies like I Am Legend. Although I Am Legend is made after this, and it is my opinion that I Am Legend is like Shaun of Dead, responding to traditional zombie movies and trying to take it up to the next level. In that case, trying to make it a much more human drama. So. But we do parody that, and I love how they do it in Shaun of the Dead. I'm a sucker for these newscaster in the background stuff because I love nominally immersive content. If you create a world and tell me I'm living in it, I will believe you. So,
I believe David's favorite line in the film is one of the newscaster's lines where he says something like, "Scientists advise that you cut off the head or destroy the brain."
Something like that. And then in the closing credits sequence, I was very happy to see the newscaster come back and highlight that line as well, because I agree. I
never thought I'd be able to say on camera.
Yeah. So, and I love how the bit is that the people just refuse to pay attention to the news. Mm-hmm. Reminds me a bit of that newer Leonardo DiCaprio movie, Don't Look Up, where the scientists say that there's an asteroid coming to destroy the Earth and no one cares, and they wouldn't even, whatever. So the people are given constant warning that these things are happening, but they're too busy with their petty day-to-day issues to pay attention to it. Mm-hmm. But when at the very beginning, when Shaun shows up to get his papers, there is a big headline that says "GM crops to blame." And it was very interesting because...
Okay, I saw there was a headline, but someone's arm slaps down on it so fast that I couldn't actually read it.
They only let you see it for a second. And so they're not willing to give... They sort of act like they're not willing to give any explanation for what's going on. But I think if you are watching it as closely as I was here, it's actually the same. It is the I Am Legend story where genetic mutation is the evil bad guy.
I'm glad that we didn't really get a chance to see that because I think that's pretty irresponsible. There's already enough fear around genetically modified crops.
We do not defeat into that baseless hysteria.
Yeah.
But
when they are in fact saving us.
Exactly. It's good to have more food to eat. But I am, at the same time, glad that the movie does give an answer if you're willing to look for it, so you can dislike that answer or whatever else. I mean, if Emma Thompson wants to invent a cancer-curing virus, I say let's try it. Let's not all try it on humans walking around New York City at the beginning, but it's the same bit. I'm
not totally sure that the timeline there makes sense, because that is the first day, which is kind of setting up Shaun's normal day. And then most of the film takes place on the second day of the film. Shaun does get drunk and go to bed, 20 minutes into the film.
I forgot that part, but I believe you.
Yeah, the film takes place on 2 days, or maybe technically 3 days if you want to, it extends past midnight on the second day. That's not how David counts time. Shaun sleeps once during the film, so 2 days.
As Shaun says, it's Saturday, and then his roommate says, no, it's Sunday.
Yeah. Do we see any actual zombies on the first day? I actually think we don't.
I don't remember.
I think all of the zombies start showing up on the second day. So they're playing a lot with the idea that, like, the actual modern human experience is pretty similar to being a zombie. So there's a lot of people sort of spaced out on the bus, staring vacantly. They're all very, like, pale and unhealthy looking. But they are not coded as zombies. They don't have the contact lenses, which is how you tell if someone is a zombie or not in this movie. So I believe we have no zombies on the first day. And it's at the beginning of the first day. So, they had to print that headline the night before when they're saying genetically modified crops to blame. It's like, to blame for what? Nothing has happened yet.
I mean, we don't actually know that this is the first day. Again, what we do know is that Shaun is out of it and bad at paying attention. Mm-hmm. So, maybe... like other global health pandemics, they start in one place and the exact danger levels are various reports. So I'm willing to believe that this is not truly day one of the crisis, or that GM crops are to blame for this sudden flu-like disease that's infecting everybody. Mm-hmm. So I see your point. I think it's fair, but I don't think we can trust the experience of our protagonists enough to let it tell us what's going on in the world. Yeah. The one thing we know about them is they don't know.
I would have had that be a headline on the second day. And of course, the point of the second day is that he shows up at the shop and there are no headlines. There are no newspapers. I was sort of trying to decide whether these two elements that we've mentioned that go on during the first day and the beginning of the second day are intention, which is you've got the message that the film is trying to establish is that modern life sort of forces people to kind of act like zombies. And also the fact that there are real zombies going on that Shaun and his friends don't notice. Is the problem Shaun and his friends not noticing, or is the problem that this is too normal? Like, it seems like the harder you push the being alive is not that different from being a zombie message, the less culpable, or the less we can laugh at, or the less of a flaw it is for our main characters that they're not noticing that there are actual zombies around.
Yeah, I feel the same tension. And though I totally get how the everyday life makes people act like zombies, I see that's a huge crowd pleaser. Personally, I find it really boring content. And
yeah, I think it doesn't help the film. Maybe we could have done that in a different film.
I feel like that was a big part of like selling the movie because it's so much about the opening and everything about it. And hey, I think it does work to get the audience on the filmmaker's side. People love to complain about the drudgery of everyday life, so I get how that's really appealing to a broad audience. But it doesn't really follow up, and I agree that it actually plays against a lot of the individual moments we have in the film. Like the nice sequence where Shaun and his good friend named Ed are walking around the streets and missing out on all these zombies, just as you're saying. That's one of the funniest parts of the movie, really. And that goes against the broader message that they have at the end. They try to bring it back by showing how even after the zombie apocalypse, everyone still is acting like zombies and sometimes. But I don't know. It seems like it's a pretty cheap laugh to me.
So one of the reasons we paired these two films together is that we normally think of zombie movies as horror movies. But as we said, these are not horror movies. One is an action movie and one is a comedy. I have to say, the first time I watched this, which was several years ago, it was less all funnies than I thought it would be. Like, I thought there were more genuine, intense, emotional moments than I expected. Like, the big one is when Shaun's mom dies, and he has to kill her because she's a zombie.
Yeah, I think that it, again, does try to hit a lot of different channels. I remember, again, like you were saying, especially the first time I was watching it, expecting it to be more pure comedy. I thought a lot of the action was more of the focus than I expected. And that's the thing that we see throughout the Cornetto trilogy is like, sort of 60s fisticuff, pulpy action scenes are a big part of what people are going to see these movies for. So, I mean, in a way, I think they're trying to parody the full zombie movie experience. And yeah, I mean, I think the actor playing the mother, did you list
Penelope
her?
Wilton.
Yeah, she's received a lot of positive acclaim for her role in the movie, both for her comedic elements, playing, stereotypical mom bits, and for the dramatic stuff that she's doing in the sumos at the end. Bill Nighy has also received a lot of... Roger Ebert said that Bill Nighy is the scene stealer of the movie, and that his deadpan comedy, the line where he's talking about his zombie bites, and he says, "I ran it under cold water." That's for some people the line of the film.
This is quite a British film. Bill Nighy is the most British in this film.
Yeah, I thought that, though, the pacing of it is a bit weird. I thought Bill Nighy's emotional moment with Shaun, because this movie does play into what to me is a kind of unfair, easy negative reaction people have to step parents. And, I think modern films are more eager to sort of play both sides of that. This is made in an era where you can just dump on step parents for pretty much the whole movie, and no one's even going to say anything. But they actually do let Bill Nighy come out and have a real moment, and I thought he was actually very compelling in that one moment of the performance. So I thought both of the parents actually did a really good job. I think both of these films are using a clever strategy of, okay, how do we make a zombie movie interesting? Well, let's really humanize the zombies. The whole point of a zombie movie is that these are people you turn against. And I think a lot of zombie movies want to have the moment where the hero has to kill one of their friends or family members that became a zombie, and how emotionally challenging that is for the hero. But I think what this movie does so effectively is it forces us to really identify with both people in that sequence. And it mirrors the emotional journey that Shaun is going through, where he is going through this crisis and he's forced to see his parents and his friends in a more human way and not just as tools for his own selfish gain. So we're going through that same journey, and it makes for a more interesting story. Whether or not those moments tug at your heartstrings, I don't know. I think they're a bit cliche in that sense. But they make actually for an interesting narrative about this person who's going through an emotional journey, and how, sometimes you're only really able to connect with people that you really care about at the end of your chance to build a relationship with them. And that's powerful.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting how when Philip, the stepfather, has gone full zombie and they've trapped him in the car, Barbara, the mom, is sort of saying, like, "Oh, we can't leave him here." And Shaun is having to explain, like, "That's not your husband. There is nothing of your husband left in that car." And then he gets put in her situation at the end when she's died, and he has to kill her. I'm always really interested by that final shot of Barbara when she's a zombie and he's staring down the gun at her, because she stands up and just looks extremely vacant. She's kind of looking at Shaun and, like, maybe seeming like she recognizes him and cares about it. It's a very muted performance, so I'm not totally sure what emotion she's trying to convey. But then David, who is rooting to kill her, says something, and she switches her gaze to him and goes, hisses, makes a scary zombie face. And that's when Shaun shoots her. I was trying to figure out, one, is Barbara looking at her son with some sort of recognition, and then she's only mad at David, who's yelling and trying to get her killed? And then also, does Shaun pull the trigger before she make the decision to pull the trigger before she goes full scary?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably he would have had to pull the trigger after she goes full scary. So I don't think
he's killing her.
Made the decision beforehand.
He's killing her in reaction to her going.
Yeah, I mean, I when I saw it, I don't think I was watching it as carefully as you were, and it seemed it was unclear to me how much it was changing to the different.
I paid really close attention to it because the first time I watched it, I had a memory of her not turning to look at David. I thought she was looking at Shaun the whole time and moves to attack Shaun, but she doesn't.
Yeah, I didn't see that part. I thought it was just supposed to be like when she has completed the transition. Now she's a zombie. She's attacking people.
So her just sort of standing there is, while the zombiness is coming online. Okay.
While the zombiness is coming online. That's what I saw when I saw it.
You gotta wait for your zombies to come online, guys. Okay, they need a second to boot up.
Well, in the beginning of the movie, or the beginning of the crisis, they hit a zombie with their car and are much relieved to drive back and see that it was in fact a zombie.
Not someone they killed.
We don't know that person was dead when they hit them. We know you become a zombie when you die. I guess the zombie virus can kill you, or no. Or maybe people are just dying of their wounds.
Yeah, so I think it's different than Walking Dead rules. So Walking Dead was very innovative in that everyone already has the virus.
Right.
And when you die, no matter how you die, you become a zombie.
Right.
In Shaun of the Dead, it appears to be more of a disease situation. So when you get bit by a zombie, and sometimes you get bit by a zombie so hard that you die. When you get bit by a zombie, you get the infection, which then causes you to become a zombie whenever you die.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is, did the mom die of her wrist wound, or did she die of the zombie virus? What is the cause of death of the mom? Or did she die from being shot in the head?
Yeah, so my medical response there would be that wound in her arm didn't seem like it was bad enough to kill her. Like she's
losing a lot of blood.
She was losing a lot of blood over several hours. True. Like she's walking around and seeming relatively fine for like more than an hour, possibly up to like 6 hours. It's not totally clear how long things are taking. I assumed, and I could be wrong, that the virus also kills you.
Yeah, that was the impression I got. So the impression I got was that hissing was just the virus fully taking the hold and connecting to the network.
But she does seem to be somewhat functional because she only hisses when she goes to look at David.
Yeah, I didn't see that clearly enough, so I think you're preaching at a level beyond what I saw.
Okay.
It is a classic David character. I can see...
David. This is the first movie we've watched that has a character named David and a character named Elizabeth.
Oh, we've got both in this one.
Yeah. This may be our first movie with a character named Elizabeth. I think we're going to be waiting a long time until we get to a movie with a character named Libby. Not a lot of Libbies in film.
I don't remember one that immediately stands out.
A Libby in a film? Or
yeah.
The most famous cinematic Libby is the one from Lost.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of it as well.
TV,
but not a film. Should have released the pilot as a film, but that's a separate issue.
And then stopped.
No, he should have stopped at season 2. J.J. Abrams just shouldn't have gone out on that stage and say it's definitely not Purgatory and ruin the whole show.
That's true.
That would have helped.
But yeah, give us insight into the David character archetype.
Oh.
As someone who has to deal with it.
Well, I mean, this is definitely the villain David character archetype. But yeah, the David character archetype is cynical, thinks they're more intellectually superior than they are, sort of always tries to draw attention on themselves, is sort of subtly manipulative. Nothing like any real person named David. Nothing like that at all. But that's sometimes a stereotype that David characters can have in film.
Yeah, I think the main Elizabeth stereotype in film is British.
Fancy.
I mean, we do have a very famous Elizabeth in Queen Elizabeth, who's had a lot of movies and TV shows made about her.
guess so.
I guess both Queen Elizabeths.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean...
Yeah, the Liz in this show, and, I'm willing to hear arguments that Liz is not really Elizabeth. Although Barbara does call her Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, you've explained to me how the many subtleties of the Elizabeth universe play out, where exactly which flavor you choose to identify of. There's some categories there. So
that's true, but I don't know if Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg know about that, so I'm not sure if we can attribute that to their having this character be called Liz rather than Elizabeth.
I see.
But yeah, she's certainly like fancier than Shaun. She wants to go out to the place that does the fish, not just the Winchester over and over again.
I wish you got to see some of the food at the Winchester.
They don't do food.
They don't do food.
No, Liz is mad because they don't do food.
I thought she's mad because she just doesn't. She said we go there all the time.
They have a Breville out back.
Oh.
They can do you a toasty.
Okay, I see.
And they have little bags of...
I see, that's it.
This is a big part of the film,
I do remember
David.
that those things came up. I thought that also, they could make a shepherd's pie or something, but no.
No, I get what you're feeling. I have occasionally gone into places in Britain advertised as a pub. Or
I've had dinner at pubs.
The New Inn in Bath will not sell you food. A bunch of them are just alcoholic establishments.
I see.
Okay. And, they might have ginger beer, which is not alcoholic. But they are drinks-only places with maybe some little snacks.
This is interesting because I have been to a few pubs in the United Kingdom, and at all of them I've had a meal. So
no, not the one at Grumble's birthday. I specifically remember them not doing food because I was very hungry.
Food there?
They did not have food, and I was like,
"Oh,
David,
that's why you were so hungry." Okay.
Yeah, I was so hungry because there was no food to eat, and then we went and got McDonald's at 11:55, and a McDonald's.
This is a big night for Livy, everyone. Livy going out to getting McDonald's at 11:55. This is madness.
I was so tired, which was only being dominated by my extreme hunger. Anyway, talking about David, talking about eating. That's the one scene that I thought was too scary. The scene where David gets eaten. I wasn't really bothered by the jump scares in Shaun of the Dead. Shaun of the Dead spends way less time building up tension before you get to the jump scare, and that's the part that I don't like.
Well, it's not a thriller. I Am Legend is a thriller.
I know. I'm not saying that it
Sure.
did it wrong.
Sure.
I'm just describing it. Yeah, so the Shaun of the Dead horror is much more of the gross out variety. So the first time when the woman, their first zombie they really interact with falls on that spike in their garden and then gets back up. Also, that's not how bodies work. Her innards would have collapsed around the hole.
Our zombie innards more
Maybe
cemented.
the genetically modified things have some sort of fungus on them, and the fungus is creating a mycelial web, which is holding your innards in place. People
are getting some pale dotting or some sort of something on their face, so maybe that's part of it. Which, interestingly, of course, in I Am Legend, if you become a zombie, you become a white. I guess, again, it's really tricky because that's supposed to be a vampire movie, and they're trying to sell it to the vampire audience, so they need to look kind of like grunge 2000 vampires. Stephenie
Meyer says all vampires are white.
Oh, wait, really?
There is a bit of a controversy in the Twilight films where the director wanted to cast some actors of color as vampires, and Stephenie Meyer, who completely unrelatedly is a Mormon, did say, no, when you become a vampire, your skin becomes white.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So, I'm...
I flabbergasted David with that one.
I was like, okay, this is not a Twilight podcast, so maybe I
also, we haven't seen Twilight, so that does make it harder for us to review it.
But, yeah, I mean, in the book I Am Legend, it is stated that the zombies... The vampires are all white. So there's something going on there. In the Omega Man 1971 film, there are definitely actors of color who are portraying the...
intermediate.
I forget what they even call them in that movie. The Brethren, who are portraying... Yeah.
Okay.
Who are portraying the Brethren. But they all have sort of white, very strong white... Makeup? Yes.
Okay.
All over
Is it
them.
meant to look like the characters, have applied this?
No. I mean, I think it is... No. And albinism is listed as a symptom of the infection there. But it doesn't... I mean, it doesn't really look like albinism. It just looks like everybody has a bunch of white makeup put on them. So all the films are representing. I mean, I guess the Last Man on Earth doesn't discuss this issue at all. So yeah, all of these films seem to be implying that there's something going on with the disease that changes your outward appearance and seems to make you more pale. So
there are black zombies in Shaun of the Dead, though.
Yeah, but even they have white makeup on their face of some type.
I would say they look more gray.
That's
like the Shaun of the Dead, you become gray, which I think would make sense because you don't have, I don't know, if you stop having blood in your face. Look, if an alien came down to Earth right now and had to list my skin as a particular color, 100% they would say my skin is pink. So some of us do have transparent skin and you can see the blood underneath. And if suddenly we didn't have blood in us anymore, I think I would look pretty gray.
So I'm pulling up for Livy. Here's a picture of the zombie in Shaun of the Dead, who it's pretty lightly applied. I guess you can call that gray or white.
Yeah,
or
I mean,
whatever.
I think the desired effect is desaturation, not paleness.
And then here's an actor from...
Okay, that is 100% a man with white makeup on, being lit by blue light.
It looks... The Omega Man makeup looks kind of like whiteface. That's what it looks like. And I don't think that's what they were going for. But, still actors are having different facial composition and hair appearance, unlike in I Am Legend, where you just become a Nosferatu guy. But yeah, the final part of David being eaten is graphic. That is some high level graphic gore. That's what they're going for.
I was a little bit surprised that we were, this is like way more than halfway through the film. It hasn't been that gross, and anything that's been gross has been kind of silly.
Yeah.
But that was the one part of Shaun of the Dead where I was like, actually, I'm going to look away. I don't need to see this. And I wasn't scared. I was like, this is just unpleasant.
Yeah, you gotta sell the movie to those horror ticket buyers, and you don't want them to go tell all their horror friends that there was no actual gross horror stuff in it. So that's how you make that money. That's a lot of the people are there to see.
Yeah, I think also possibly why they had to be so intense was that it needs to make Diane go out there and it needs to make Diane go crazy. I thought the way they got rid of Diane seemed pretty lazy. Like we've just established that she knows that David isn't in love with her. He's been in love with Liz the whole time. Maybe you could still be in love with someone anyway, but probably less than if they also genuinely loved you back. And then she's like, David has been destroyed. I'm going to grab his leg and but not just make a decision for myself, but put everyone else in this pub in danger by opening the doors. And I'm going to go out there and just absolutely suicide run, kamikaze into the zombies with this leg. I thought that was probably the weakest point of the film.
I think you're probably right, actually. I mean, I think that we've spent 90 minutes just building up this idea that this David character is awful. And, I mean, that's part of also what the gore is supposed to be there for. It's supposed to be cathartic, because finally you can get back at that snotty David guy that everyone wants to execute their local David. And so we're supposed to be loving this moment. But yeah, I feel like it takes... I thought her character was actually very interesting. And she was one of the more interesting people to watch throughout the whole movie, because she is not just a single archetype. She has several different things going. She moves between the different factions of the group politically. I liked her actor scene. And so I do agree. I thought that sold the character really short. I think the film would have benefited from another sweep in the cinematography. I feel like there is some interesting shots and some things are portrayed in a very interesting way, but it's not well connected and shots don't lead in to another one, and there's no real sense of narrative structure within the scene. So I kind of found it, especially watching for it this time, I kind of found it unpleasant to watch sometimes. And I felt
movie as a whole?
The movie as a whole. Okay. Especially on a scene-to-scene level, because so many transitions between different parts of action and the different emotions we were carrying, I thought were handled clumsily with the camera.
Yeah, they do have that one really impressive long shot, which is at the opening of day 2, where I'm I'm pretty sure there's no cuts, but it's like maybe a 5-minute shot following Shaun walking from his house across sort of a block and a half to the store to get the cornetto, and then walks back home. And we see people who, when he's walking to the store, are way in the background and are clearly shuffling along zombie-like. Then get much closer by the time he's coming home. And I think those people had to just do a zombie shuffle for 5 minutes while that shot went on. So it seemed like they put a lot of care into that one shot, and then the rest of the cinematography, they were just like, we're just going to do the basic capturing of the scene.
Yeah, I thought that was a really nice moment. And, I don't think they actually sold how impressive what they were doing was. You almost don't notice it if you're not looking for it. But it is cool and it is interesting. And I want to be clear that I think there are lots of moments in this film that look great. Lots of really interesting and clever cinematography. And I don't feel like, oh, this person doesn't know how to, take a photograph. I don't feel that way at all. I think there's definitely interesting stuff. I feel like the film is failing at the composition of the cinematography. These pieces are not put together in a way that's elegant or informative. And if you're trying to appreciate this movie as a primarily visual experience, then I think you're being sent a lot of misleading signals. You're not looking at the right places. You're not appreciating what's going on. And when you see the next thing come online, you have to totally reorient the way you're looking at the shot. So I feel like there's poor transition work, and there's a lot of really interesting pieces, but then there's no one that's actually thinking about how the movie fits together as a whole visually.
Had the main people working on this film, Wright, Frost, and Pegg, mainly done television up to this point? Okay, that makes sense.
I think that you're so right. Yeah. And there's just frankly, especially in British television, compared to American television, there's such a minimal emphasis placed on cinematography and visual storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I do see that I could imagine the narrative of these people coming into the situation and say, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to have real cinematography. We're going to do real shots. We're going to do interesting things. And they do succeed. But I would have loved more supervision from a director of photography, and maybe more work at the storyboarding level. Maybe they did all those things, and I don't know their process, but that's where I think it's at the planning process. This movie I don't think was properly storyboarded, but it has a lot of cool concepts. Both of these movies put a heavy focus on music, which is not something that we normally relate to the zombie apocalypse in particular.
Yeah, they both have intense turning on and off of radio sequences.
Yes, and they both sort of heavily feature a particular artist as emblematic of both the aesthetic and ideological components of the film, with I Am Legend having Bob Marley sort of being this heroic figure that Robert Neville looks up to and sort of sees himself modeling his own partially misguided heroism on, and his refusal to give up, and I think pretty effectively uses the music of Bob Marley. It's a great implementation in the closing credits and everything. And then Shaun of the Dead with its focus on Queen.
Yeah, there's a whole Queen music video in there. Don't Stop Me Now.
Don't Stop Me Now. Definitely improved its chart performance after this movie was released. That is a fact. The idea of having these people sort of let loose and refuse to give up, and even sort of refuse to not have fun in this horrible situation, which I thought the music carried out pretty well. I didn't actually love the choreography that they implemented in their little music
I mean,
video.
They were clearly trying to beat, that's a hard shot to get. They're beating a man who, with golf clubs, was it golf clubs? Pool cues. One of those sports with the little balls, where you hit the white one. I know sports. Mm-hmm. A man clearly in padding. That they were, they just didn't have the budget to actually do that fight choreography.
I think they should have picked different choreography, maybe.
I did kind of get into the sense. I was like, actually, if I had to fight a bunch of zombies, I might put on a Queen song. Something with a really strong beat. Because I could see how it would, the get some extra power into your hits if you've got a rhythm to be hitting at.
Yeah, in theory, you're not supposed to do it super rhythmically, because then you're going to overemphasize the back swing, and you need to put all of your force into the forward swing. But maybe.
Get a syncopated song.
Maybe something with a slow beat. You're going to need to give yourself some time to do a proper swing. That guy looks a lot like Alfred Molina. And there was a meaningful portion of the film where I was like, I didn't know Alfred Molina was in this movie. But I'm pretty sure it's not.
Yeah, I don't think Alfred was old enough at that point. And also, that guy
aging him up, but
that guy was wearing a wig. Also, is Alfred Molina British?
I don't think so.
Okay. Alfred Molina was born in London, England.
Oh, wow.
It was Alfred Molina.
It was Alfred Molina the whole time. It is a good New York accent. He uses it a lot, but he's good at it.
It's that classical training, David.
I'm not disagreeing.
You gotta get that classical training. Penelope, you know who has classical training in this movie? Penelope Wilton and Bill Nighy.
Yeah.
And those are the people you like the most.
It's true. You got me.
So, David, I told you that the order we had to watch these films in was I Am Legend, then Shaun of the Dead. You seem to think that was maybe a bad idea, so I'll let you make your case here. I will say, I initially, having not seen I Am Legend, I thought it was more standard. So I thought it would be correct to do the standard piece and then the parody. Also, I am glad that we watched these in this order because I Am Legend is scarier than Shaun of the Dead. And I needed Shaun of the Dead as a buffer to fill my brain before I went to sleep because we watched these in the evening. Because let me tell you, I don't like watching horror movies, but if the last thing I've experienced before going to bed is watching a horror movie, I'm fucking doomed. This one time when I was like 9, Mom was away on a work trip. Dad's in charge, and in my family, Mom was the strict one and Dad was the chill one. Dad took me to Blockbuster. Let me pick 2 movies. I picked Beetlejuice and the Beatles movie, Help. I was really into Beatles that day. Went home. I was like, okay, I'm going to start with Help. Starting my Tuesday night movie marathon with Help at like 5 p.m. And then after that, I watched Beetlejuice.
There's the part with the tiger.
There is the part with the tiger. I wasn't afraid of picture of a tiger.
Excellent scene. One of the top 100 scenes in the history of cinema.
Then I watched Beetlejuice. And let me tell you, 9-year-old Libby did not like the part where Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin come back from the dead and then start dying again. I didn't like that at all. So I had to watch Help again and ended up staying up way too late because I couldn't go to bed having just watched Beetlejuice. So if you are also a scaredy cat like me, watch the scary one first. That's the top priority.
This is one of the most Libby stories I've ever heard, but that's true. This is not surprising. But yeah. I definitely appreciate the argument of let's watch the standard one first and then let's watch the one that's a parody. And so that's why when you felt that way and you felt that way strongly, it made sense to me. And I think it's a good way to watch it. I think that you can definitely have that narrative here. And, I don't think the order matters a huge amount. Mm-hmm. I think that both of these films, as I think you might agree with me now, are in fact, they're both reactions to conventional zombie, vampire, infected movies. And they are both trying to take a different stance on it. And I actually think it's I Am Legend that is more innovative. And
especially with the original ending.
Yeah, that's true. That is even more different. That's a fair point. I don't know. To me, the experience of competing against the zombies as Will Smith is so intense and so engaging. I don't need at the end for him to be friends with them or whatever. I don't need that to happen to be like, wow, we've been thinking about this wrong the whole time. When I watch the movie, I think it's almost more interesting to leave open the question of like, wait, shouldn't have we been negotiating with them then? Couldn't we have been doing this a totally different way?
Okay, and let the main character be wrong?
Yeah, to have I love it when the films where the main character is wrong. And I think it's more powerful to see, and more believable, more credible to see Will fail. A part of it is that,
I mean, I think he does realize that he was wrong, but he's like, but at this point it's too late. I just have to die.
I think that I Am Legend is playing even more against type than Shaun of the Dead, and that it's more interesting to see that one as the more alt part of this story. So, though I totally understood why you said that, I think at least now that you've seen them both, you see where I'm coming from, where I actually think if you're not worried about stomaching the action or the horror, then you might enjoy watching Shaun of the Dead first, because it's a much it asks a lot less of you now. And I don't. I Am Legend is not a long movie. I mean, it's very intense. It's very emotional. It's sad, but it's not that draining of a film to watch. It's actually pretty easy to watch. Again, there's not a lot of dialogue to listen to, so I think I Am Legend is a more thoughtful experience. And I'd rather somebody sort of set up the genre with a movie like Shaun of the Dead, and then have us really dig into it with I Am Legend. I think it's more interesting to watch it in the opposite order, but at the same time, maybe the moral of the story is that this order doesn't really matter here. And if anything,
watch a conventional zombie movie first, then watch either of these two.
I think probably the answer is this is a triple feature with Night of the Living Dead, Shaun of the Dead, and I Am Legend, to see standard zombie movie, person parodying standard zombie movie, person trying to make a post-standard zombie movie. Subverting, thank you. So I didn't think we were going to do 3 zombie movies.
Absolutely not.
And I figured that Night of the Living Dead, if anything, would be the less interesting. I mean, it's a very low budget movie. It's made a long time ago. And if you don't want to watch it as an action movie, it doesn't deliver with horror or personal drama at the same level.
And now, from the future, it's Libby and David to talk about the next episode of the podcast, which we are sorry to say is not going to be on November 30th. We have bought a house. The move is taking up a lot of our time, so we just think we're going to be too busy to make a podcast. But to make up for this, we are going to be releasing 2 episodes in December. I know that a lot of podcasts that are done by people professionally, they take off the last 2 weeks of December, leaving your podcast queue woefully empty, often when you need it the most because you're doing a lot of traveling. So we are here to fill that gap. So you will be getting a normal episode a couple days before Christmas.
The Christmas episode.
There will be a Christmas episode where we'll be talking about which movies, David?
We'll be talking about Love Actually, a Christmas classic from 2003, and the thematically related film Scenes of a Sexual Nature from 2006.
Yes, Scenes of a Sexual Nature, set, I think, in summertime. So this is for everyone in the Southern Hemisphere. We got you guys covered as well. And then on the last day of the month, when our podcast normally releases, we will have a very special episode.
Very excited.